The sky over the Baltic Sea was painted in shades of deep crimson and violet as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. At 6:23 p.m., Squadron Leader James Hartley sat in the cockpit of his RAF Typhoon, breathing steadily as he monitored his instruments during what was supposed to be a routine patrol mission. The hum of the twin engines provided a familiar comfort, a sound he had grown to love during his 12 years of service. His radio crackled with occasional chatter from ground control, confirming his position and flight path. Everything felt normal, peaceful even, as he glided to the thin clouds at 30,000 feet. But in the military, James had learned that peace was often just a prelude to chaos. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. His radar screen suddenly lit up with 4 fast-moving contacts approaching from the east. James felt his heart rate spike as he quickly assessed the situation. The blips were closing in at incredible speed, and within seconds, his radio erupted with an urgent transmission from his wingman, Flight Lieutenant Sarah Chun, who was patrolling 15 miles to his south. "Hartley, I've got multiple bogies on radar. Moving to intercept your position." Sarah's voice was tense but controlled. James immediately switched to his combat radar mode and felt a chill run down his spine. 4 Russian Sukhoi Su-35 fighters were converging on his location in a coordinated pattern that could only mean one thing. This was no accident. Within 90 seconds, James could see them with his own eyes. The 4 Su-35s emerged from the clouds like predators closing in on prey, their sleek gray bodies cutting through the air with deadly grace. They positioned themselves in a perfect box formation around his Typhoon, one above, one below, and one on each side. James was surrounded. His hands gripped the control stick tighter as sweat began to form on his brow, despite the cool temperature in the cockpit. The lead Russian pilot's voice came through on the international emergency frequency, speaking in accented but clear English. "British aircraft, you are in restricted airspace. You will follow us to the designated coordinates immediately." James knew this was a lie. His navigation systems confirmed he was well within international airspace, but the Russians were testing him, testing Britain, testing how far they could push before someone pushed back. "Negative," James replied, keeping his voice steady even as his mind raced through options. "I am in international airspace, conducting a lawful patrol. I will not deviate from my course." The silence that followed felt like an eternity. James could see the Russian fighter to his right edge closer, so close that he could make out the red star on its fuselage. His threat warning system began to chirp as the Russians activated their targeting radars, painting his aircraft with invisible beams that could guide missiles to his position in seconds. This was a dangerous game, one that could spark an international incident or worse. James thought of his wife Emma and his 6-year-old daughter Lily back home in Yorkshire. He thought of how Lily had hugged him before this deployment, making him promise to come home safely. That promise felt fragile now, suspended in the cold air of the Baltic. Sarah's voice crackled through his headset again. "James, I'm vectoring toward your position, but I'm 8 minutes out. Command says hold your course, and do not engage unless fired upon." 8 minutes might as well have been 8 hours in a situation like this. The Su-35 above him descended slightly, deliberately drifting into a position that would make any evasive maneuver on James's part extremely dangerous. The Russian pilot was boxing him in, eliminating his options one by one. James could feel the pressure building, not just from the situation, but from the weight of representing his country in this moment. One wrong move, and he could either be shot down or accidentally trigger a conflict that could escalate beyond anyone's control. His training kicked in, the countless hours of simulation and preparation that had prepared him for exactly this scenario. He had to stay calm, had to think strategically, had to find a way out without backing down. Then something unexpected happened. James noticed that the Russian formation, while intimidating, had a weakness. The fighter below him was positioned slightly too far back, creating a small gap in their box. It wasn't much, maybe a window of 3 to 4 seconds, but it was something. More importantly, James realized something else. The Russians were flying aggressively but not recklessly. They were following orders, trying to force him to comply through intimidation. But they weren't actually looking for a fight. If they wanted to shoot him down, they would have done it already. This was theater, a dangerous performance of military posturing, where everyone was playing a role. James made a decision that would either be called brilliant or career-ending, depending on how the next few minutes unfolded. He keyed his radio to the emergency frequency and spoke directly to the Russian lead. "Russian flight leader, I acknowledge your position. I propose we maintain current formation and fly together for 2 minutes while our commands discuss this situation. No one needs to escalate today." There was a pause, and James could almost feel the Russian pilot weighing his options, probably communicated with his own command. Then the response came, and there was something almost resembling respect in the voice. "British pilot, your proposal is acceptable. 2 minutes, then you will turn to bearing 270 and exit this area." James didn't agree to the second part, but he had bought himself time. More importantly, he had changed the dynamic from confrontation to something resembling negotiation. As they flew together in that surreal formation, 5 fighter jets from different nations locked in a deadly dance, James felt time slow down. He could see the Russian pilot to his left glance over at him. Just a brief look between 2 men who were enemies by politics but brothers in the sky. Sarah's voice came through an update. She was now 4 minutes out, and 2 more RAF Typhoons were scrambling from their base. The balance was shifting. The Russians knew it too. Their formation began to loosen slightly, almost imperceptibly. But James noticed he was no longer surrounded. He was being escorted, and there was a difference. As the 2-minute mark approached, James made his next move, one that would stun military analysts around the world when the gun camera footage was later reviewed. Instead of turning away as the Russians expected, James smoothly executed a vertical climb, using the Typhoon's superior thrust-to-weight ratio to shoot upward to the gap in their formation. The maneuver was so sudden and executed with such precision that the Russian pilots were caught completely off guard. By the time they could react, James was 2,000 feet above them and accelerating away at supersonic speed. But he didn't run. That was the stunning part. James leveled out just beyond their range and held position, now joined by Sarah, who had arrived at full afterburner. Together, the 2 British Typhoons faced the 4 Su-35s in open sky, no longer trapped but not retreating either. The message was clear. We will not be bullied, but we will not start a war. The Russian formation held for another 30 seconds, then simultaneously broke away, turning east toward their own airspace. No shots were fired. No one was hurt, but something significant had happened in that Baltic sky. As James and Sarah flew home together in the fading twilight, James finally allowed himself to breathe deeply. His hands were still shaking slightly from the adrenaline, but he felt an overwhelming sense of relief and pride. When he landed at base 40 minutes later, he was met by his commanding officer and a room full of analysts who had watched the entire encounter unfold on radar. What happened next would be debated in military circles for years. Was it brilliant flying, diplomatic instinct, or just incredible luck? Perhaps it was all three, but what mattered most to James was that he had kept his promise to Lily and found a way through an impossible situation without firing a single shot.